Mo True Crime. I am your host, Anne Marie, and I love true crime.
I am your co-host, Mark, and I hate true crime.
We'll discuss old and new, solved and unsolved Missouri true crime cases.
And sometimes we'll take a road trip or fly around the world to bring you a mystery from other parts of the world.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Mo True Crime. Please like us and share with your friends.
This podcast is not suitable for children. Please use caution when listening around others as the subject matter can be upsetting.
This week we're in Vinita Park in Bridgeton, Missouri. Linda Sherman was born in 1957, raised in North St. Louis County in Ferguson. She was the youngest daughter in the family, and at 17 years old she got pregnant, married her high school classmate Donald Sherman in a small ceremony. Both Linda and Donald continued going to school and rented a house next door to Linda's parents. Linda gave birth to her daughter Patricia Marie during summer break from school. While Linda attended her last year of high school, her mother watched baby Patty. The young couple struggled to make ends meet, and Linda often worked several part-time jobs. In 1977, Linda and Don separated, and Linda filed for divorce. However, the divorce wasn't followed through, and in 1979, a judge dismissed the petition for failure to prosecute. Linda and Don reconciled and bought a house in Vinita Park. In the 80s, Linda started having seizures and was diagnosed with epilepsy and suffered a miscarriage. By 1982, Linda moved out of the family home to an apartment in St. Anne, taking 7-year-old Patty with her. In September, Linda filed an order of protection against Don, claiming that he had threatened her and tampered with her car. She stated Don threatened to take his own life and possibly that of my daughter or myself. She described him as mentally unstable. A judge granted the order of protection and ordered Don to pay $20 a week in child support. But within a month, Don and Linda were back together and in October of 1982 wrote a letter to the court to remove the order of protection. In 1985, not long after Don and Linda's 10th wedding anniversary, Linda again filed for divorce. Linda continued living with Don as he had not been served papers for the divorce, but Don suspected Linda was having an affair. A co-worker of Don saw Linda with another man and a co-worker of Linda's. Don claimed Linda had previously cheated on him many times. On April 22, 1985, Linda worked an evening shift and signed out at 2:16 a.m. She got home and slept on the couch. Linda would normally take Patty to school, but this day Don did. According to Don, Linda left for work at 6 p.m. However, Linda never made it to work that night, and she was never seen again. Linda's family insisted that Linda wouldn't leave her 9-year-old daughter and that something just wasn't right. Don told police that an overnight bag and other items appeared to be missing and that Linda had left him twice before. 4 days after Linda went missing, her yellow VW Beetle was found in a parking lot at Lambert Airport with no signs of Linda. Airport staff had noted on April 24th that the car had been there longer than 24 hours. Within a week of her disappearance, her husband Don reported seeing Linda riding in a van with someone else, but had no other information. A year after Linda disappeared, Don filed for divorce, stating that Linda had abandoned him and their daughter. Don's lawyer, Frank Anzalone, also represented Don's mother in 1974. In February of 1974, Audrey Sherman, Don's mother, shot and killed Charles Sherman, Don's father, in the family's home in Cool Valley. Audrey pled guilty to manslaughter and served 6 months in the county jail. It's not a whole lot of time. Shot and kill someone and you get 6 months in the county jail.
Oh no! So Don's side, he had a history of violence in his family, I guess, huh? He had his mom killed his dad.
Yeah,
his mom shot him.
In 1974, and in 1977 is when Don and Linda got married. So he would have still been in high school
when all this went down.
Or no, I'm sorry, they got married in 1975, I believe. So a year before they got married, Don's mother shot and killed Don's father. That
must have been a tremendous shock. And then soon after that, he has a new child, right? I mean, around the same time, because you said they married after a year of
and this was in February of 1974.
Little Patty.
The funny thing is, though, she pled guilty to manslaughter and served 6 months in county jail. I mean, that's like nothing.
So there must have been some reason. I mean, it's just like she said, like, I'm assuming Don's father must have been pretty violent or something, and then this came out through court case or something like that, and so maybe there's some abuse to Don as well, right?
Could have been, yeah.
So do you think, was there any record of Patty being abused? Do we know?
Not that there's no record that I could find of Patty ever having suffered any kind of abuse. No. Okay. She was only she would have been 9 years old when her mother went missing.
Yeah.
So let's keep going after this. So 3 years after the disappearance in 1988, Anzalone's office had the divorce. Now this is the attorney for Don's mother and for Don now at this point for the divorce. His office, the attorney's office, had the divorce case placed on the docket of uncontested divorces. However, in 1989, so a year later, because Linda was still missing, a judge dismissed the divorce case, leaving the Sherman marriage intact. So at this point, The case kind of has been cold since 1985.
So the last thing, what do we know, the last things that happened? The Volkswagen Bug was found at Lambert Airport, which is in St. Louis, which is in, not really North County, though. I guess it's not that.
It is considered the county, yeah. It is St. Louis County,
yeah.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And, all right, so what have the police done during that brief period? What did they find out? I mean, they went searching for this lady.
I think according to Don, they...
And nothing happened to the Patty, right? Nothing happened to little Patty. Little Patty, she's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, she's fine as far as I know. I think the police did an investigation and...
So the first suspect is always the husband. Were they? No, yeah. They were still married because they had not approved the divorce.
Yeah.
Right? So they were still married.
Well, they had actually...
So the primary
suspect... They filed
suspect
for divorce and then they...
got back together after a short period of time.
They dismissed it because they didn't do anything about it. So Linda filed for divorce twice. She had an order of protection in 1982.
Right,
and
and this is
filed for
1985,
divorce,
so it's
but
like
she had-
3 years later.
Yeah, but she had also filed for divorce in, was it 77? Yeah, they separated in 1977 and she filed for divorce. And then so that's 1977. Then in 1982, she got an order of protection and she filed for divorce for a second time. The first time she filed for divorce, it was dismissed, and the second time it was dismissed as well. Actually, she wrote a letter to the judge asking that it be dismissed.
Yeah, so he didn't have to pay child support, just $20 a week or something.
Yeah, which, I mean, this is 1982, so that would be $80 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's comparable to now.
So when this all went down, when Patty's vehicle, when she went missing, were they still living together? They were, right?
Yeah, because if you remember, I said she was still living in the family home because he had not been served yet. So I guess she didn't want to rock the boat. She wanted to just continue on until he was served, and then maybe she felt like after that she could leave.
But didn't she file another restraint? Didn't she file a restraint at the
same time? No, that was back in
77.
No, that was in 82 where she had an order of protection. She didn't file that I can see an order of protection in 1985 before she went missing. She had just filed for divorce, and I guess it takes a couple of weeks for the sheriff to serve.
Unless it's an emergency.
Right.
Yeah.
So it seemed like she was just kind of waiting around for him to get served before she would actually leave.
Okay.
From 1985.
So do we think you can make this link? Your father's been taken away from you. You know, he was killed by your mom, and he's worried about his daughter being taken away from him. I guess I'm assuming that he's guilty, right? We don't know because he never came out. He was never guilty. He was a suspect.
This is an unsolved murder.
So now you're going to take my daughter. I'm not going through this.
Well, each time Patty did actually leave him, she did take Linda. I keep wanting to call her Linda. And Patty, I get them mixed up. Linda, each time she left, so the two times before that she had left, she did take Patty with her. So yeah, I mean, it could be a motive right there, is that she each time would take Patty and he didn't want her to take Patty.
Or were there any other suspects in this investigation, or is it just primarily focused on...
In all of my research, there is never been another suspect other than her husband as a suspect, and he has been very vocal. He's been very, I don't know if it's cooperating or not, but you know, he was under a lot of scrutiny and he always said he had nothing to hide and he didn't do this, but there is, to my knowledge, I mean, the police aren't going to really tell you if there is, but there's not been in any of the articles that I have found another mention of any other suspect. None.
Okay, so she went at 2:16 a.m., right? What was the 2:16 a.m.? What was that?
Well, she worked a second shift. It was more like it was a really late second shift. So on April 22nd, she signed out of work at 2:16 a.m.
Mm-hmm. But her car shows up at the airport.
Right.
Okay.
In one of the articles I read, it was actually a relative that, I guess a couple of weeks prior, there was a case in Kansas City where someone went missing and they found their car at the airport. So a relative of hers, I think it was an aunt, decided, you know, she woke up in the middle of the night and she thought, we should go look at the airport for her car because of this case that had just happened a couple of weeks before, gave her the idea. So they actually drove to the airport in the middle of the night.
That's the person I'd be questioning. Why would you think of going to the airport to look for
Now, you know, that would be
vehicle?
Something I could, that's something I would think of.
Let's take a trip to the airport and look for a yellow Volkswagen.
And they found it. They're
vehicle.
the ones that found the car. It wasn't the police, but the police went back and said, I guess the airport.
That's like, who smelt it, dealt it. Who knows that person?
I mean, I think when someone goes missing, you probably look to every avenue of trying to find them. So
Yeah, I guess it doesn't hurt, right? You hear
it
this,
doesn't
like, wow, that's
seem
crazy. Big
and I
airport.
think the reason why it was fresh in their minds is because this person had been missing. You know, it was all over the news, this person that had been missing, and they found his car at the airport and he was actually in the trunk. So he was actually in the
This other
car.
case, you're talking about this other
Yeah,
case,
this other
yeah,
case that had
yeah.
happened like a couple of weeks prior to this, which made her, gave an aunt or a cousin, I'm not sure which, I'm sorry, but I forgot which relative did this, but it gave them the idea of, maybe she's in the vehicle.
So
So
what was Donald doing that night? What was his alibi? He had to tell him something. Yeah, I was doing something.
I don't think he needed an alibi because he said he was home. And so that morning she goes missing. So normally what would happen, and this is according to Dawn, is that she would get home 2:30, 3 in the morning, and she would sleep on the couch. In the morning she would take Patty to school, and she would come back and I guess get some more sleep or do things that she needed to do before she would go to work that night. That morning Don took Patty to school, which I guess was kind of out of the norm, and then he proceeded to work, and he said that was the last time that he saw her, was that morning she was sleeping on the couch, and that's why he took Patty to school. And then she never reported to work, and he had not seen her again. So in 1985 is when she goes missing. A year after that, so in 1986, Don tries to get the divorce pushed through. In 1988, he has an attorney try to push it through. And again, the case kind of went cold pretty quickly after 1985. So nothing's really happening on it until 1990. In 1990, actually it wasn't even 1990, it was 1991, but in 1990, at the Casa Gallardo restaurant in Bridgeton, two flight attendants sitting by a window having lunch noticed in the landscaping out the window it looked like there was a human skull. The manager of the restaurant called Bridgeton police, and the skull was taken to the medical examiner's office and determined to have female characteristics, but that no foul play was suspected, and the skull was placed on a shelf at the county morgue with no name. Don Sherman was at that Casa Gallardo the day the skull was found. A regular place he would get drinks, and recalls that the skull was, quote, the talk of the restaurant, end quote. So don't you think that's a little odd that there's a skull,
That's
Don
just more than
Sherman's
coincidence.
there?
And this restaurant, it's interesting. There's two flight attendants that found this. Her car was found in an airport, right? It's two flight attendants.
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
That's just weird, right? And
That is a little weird.
I wonder if he was hooked
So-
up with these two flight attendants. Hey, you happen to be at this restaurant. I got something to show you.
I'm not sure if that has any relation. They said that the skull it looked like it was Halloween decorations or, something that was fake, and it was actually facing the restaurant. So when they looked out the window, it was actually facing them. They're unable to identify. Now, the skull does have the jawbone, so it's got the top teeth and the bottom teeth. I know the police at that time checked with, some local dentists. They weren't able to find anything from that. So nothing really happened. And unfortunately, the skull was placed, in a box and put on a shelf. And then we are in September of 1991. So 14 months after the skull was found. Veneta Park Police Department. Now remember, Veneta Park is where Don and Linda were living. They had their home in Veneta Park. So the Veneta Park Police Department received a letter in an unsealed envelope. No return address, and inside was an 8-month-old Super Bowl flyer from Casa Gallardo in Bridgeton, advertising cheap drinks and free nachos. On the other side, stamped in purple ink and in all caps, said, "The Bridgeton police have L. Sherman's skull."
So whoever sent this letter is trying to let them know, here's a link. You guys are missing something. Go look in this.
So somebody first of all knew that skull was found in that landscaping. So somebody, I'm not sure that was really out there. Well, it wasn't public knowledge that a skull was found at Casa Gallardo. It was there was articles about it, but how would you make that connection unless you knew?
So do you think that those people at the restaurant, they knew that was in the garden, that was sitting out there in their landscaping? If somebody goes out, oh, that's a real skull, or this is a Halloween decoration.
Well, it sounded like
somebody have to knock on it. That's what I go knock.
Well,
it's hard.
So when the flight attendants saw the skull, they told the manager. The manager did not. This was like a lunch rush. The manager did not want chaos in the restaurant, and it's kind of bad for business if skulls are popping up in your landscaping, So he drew the curtains or pulled down the blinds or shades. He immediately called the police. I don't really know until the police arrived.
Oh, this is good background noise for this podcast.
So I don't really know why Oh my gosh.
Could be another one happening right now, folks. Stay tuned.
I don't really know why, until the police arrived, that the whole restaurant would really know. I mean, maybe that is something that would spread pretty quickly throughout a
I
restaurant.
would think. I'm eating this Mexican restaurant. This skull looks at me. And these flight attendants are flying around in the air saying, yeah, I just had Mexican food and the skull's staring at me. You know,
I know, but
spread it.
anyways, maybe it was the talk of the restaurant. Not sure. I would think as a business owner, you wouldn't really want that. You'd want to kind of get that taken care of pretty quickly. After they received this letter, which, let's go back to this. So this letter was on a flyer from the restaurant from that time.
So what time
it was
that?
found.
What Super Bowl was that?
Super Bowl. It was a Super Bowl flyer advertising. It was 8 months old by the time they got it. I'm sorry. Yeah, 8 months old.
Is that about
so
the last
this is in September.
St. Louis was in the Super Bowl, maybe? I don't know. Okay.
It doesn't matter if St. Louis was in it or not.
Well, I'm trying to link all these things, right? Why would he put it on a Super Bowl flyer?
Because he was clearly at
Casa
Gallardo. This is a clue. This is someone giving you a clue. They're putting on a Casa Gallardo flyer because that's where the skull was found, and they're saying the Bridgeton police have L. Sherman's skull. They're trying to tell you there's no leads. They're finding nothing. They have no idea whose skull this is. It's like somebody that knows whose skull that is trying to tell them, you know? It's kind of like, you know,
yeah, but he can just go down to the police department. Whoever sent this note did it. They have to have.
Well, according to Don, it's someone that wanted to set him up because that's a place he went to, you know, that was his local watering hole, and that's someone was trying to set him up of whoever killed her. But it's kind of like the police had nothing until somebody gave him. It's like in Seven. You know, in Seven, John Doe actually goes in with the bloody finger, you know, he had been cutting off his fingerprints and goes in with the bloody and he puts his hands up. And then he later says, I remember it was me, not you, that walked into the police station and, you know, he gave himself up. So it's kind of like that maybe there was some guilt as well, you know.
From who?
From whoever killed her. Here she is in her final resting place in an unnamed
Yeah, but they had to know
when
they were watching him be at that restaurant when this went down. Who? If it's not Dawn, then it's somebody else, right? Somebody else.
Right. Somebody had to know that he was there at the restaurant at that time.
Right.
But doesn't it make more sense that you're at a restaurant and a skull shows up? I mean, that you put it there. It's like hiding in plain sight. If you want to get rid of something and it's your local watering hole,
you wouldn't put it there.
You wouldn't put it. Yeah, you wouldn't. You don't shit where you eat. You know?
Well, I mean, unless you want that notoriety, some of these people, it's like a game, right? I'm gonna see if I can get found out. Like, you know, you take something. I wonder if somebody's gonna know I took this, and then you kind of watch those pyro people, right? They set fires, and then they're like out in the crowd, seeing what happens. You see if they.
Well, there's a lot of cases that people. BTK is a perfect example. Like, police aren't. That's how Maury Travis got caught. He sent a letter and a map because the police weren't moving fast enough. They weren't finding the bodies. Kind of like they had to help them along, you know?
Yeah, so
but there's a lot of.
When you never want to give out clues, it's like, okay, let's just drop it. Let's
drop it. That's not the mentality that they take because.
But this is not a serial killer. That BTK guy.
BTK?
Yeah. He is a serial killer, right? I don't think this guy's a serial killer.
Yeah, I don't think BTK wanted to get caught.
And the other guy that
Maury Travis.
Yeah, he was a serial killer. You can't relate serial killers to non-serial killers.
He was a serial killer, but I think there's...
Okay, it's totally different.
It is totally different.
This Don guy probably has one on his bedpost.
But the case is not getting solved, and the reason why that person sent that letter to the police department saying this is L. Sherman's skull is that guilt because they're knowing that she's sitting, you know, her skull is sitting in a box, but then where's the rest of her body?
All they could have done is say, look, I know about this. I've heard about this. They have the skull and this case is missing over here. See if there's a link. That's what you'd have to do. Whoever did, I assume it's a guy, probably a woman.
But then it would say, you might want to look into that skull being L. Sherman's. No, this says the Bridgeton police have L. Sherman's skull. It's very matter of fact. It's very much that the person that wrote that is also the person that knew that skull was Linda Sherman's, which means they're probably the ones that put it there.
Oh, yeah.
So dental records confirmed that the skull found in the landscaping at Casa Gallardo was indeed Linda Sherman's. There was no saliva or fingerprints on the letter, and the FBI could not find there's nothing identifiable about the letter. So it was unsealed, so they didn't use any kind of... I mean, you can seal an envelope without using saliva. In fact, I don't seal envelopes by licking them.
I do.
Well,
how else do you seal an envelope?
With water.
Oh.
Well, they must have thought like you because they just didn't even bother sealing it to avoid. And this is 1991. DNA is not really at the forefront. So this is somebody that is kind of, they're trying to be careful, which leads me to believe that they're not sending this to get attention on them. They're sending this because of guilt. They want that box that has her skull in it to be identified so she can be buried, so she can be, rest
so he
in
can
peace.
Get his divorce. Right? That's the judge wouldn't honor his divorce because she was not found, right? He rejected it. Right?
Oh, that's a good point.
Man, I am like the supreme
We're gonna
crime
cut this
solver.
out. We're gonna cut that out. You need to stop with the pompous shit. Okay. So Linda's skull was sent to the University of Missouri in Columbia, where an archaeologist studied there was traces of soil, and a botanist examined the plant material adhering to her skull, and they only found that the plant material was of the morning glory species, the purple vines that are common throughout Missouri. When I was reading this, it says that soil on a skull or remains is really hard to pinpoint location because you could take a soil sample from the front of your yard and then take a soil sample from the back of your yard and it be completely different. So it is very hard to determine unless it's somewhere maybe like another country or just a completely different season, weather-wise. Other than that, soil's not going to really identify a location of where that body could have been. So the questions are, where's the rest of her body? So I did a little bit of digging, and one thing also to note is that Don...
And there's no motive. What's the motive?
Don has never taken a polygraph, by the way. So there was a detective that worked on this case. He was pretty obsessed with it. Unfortunately, he died in 2009, not seeing the case solved. But he was, according to Don, the number one suspect. And he would take cadaver dogs to his home. He searched his home. He did all of these intrusive things, according to Don, and didn't feel like there was any kind of evidence that Don, committed this murder or had anything to do with Linda's disappearance. So I did a little bit of digging. Don lived in that same home in Menina Park until the last few years. I looked on Google Maps and the home's been rehabbed on the outside, but in the backyard, it looks like there's an old kind of broken down shed. One of those metal sheds that you see in backyards, and I don't know if it's still there. He does know, he doesn't live there anymore. So I would think, if he buried a dead body in the backyard, he probably wouldn't move.
Well, if they had those cadaver dogs and things like that and they tried to go sniff it, I'm thinking he probably didn't bury it.
Like bury her there. They did at one point do a burial search. I think it was in Cape Girardeau, which is quite a few hours away, but they did do a search, but there was very limited. They did some kind of dig. I don't know if they got a tip, but they didn't find anything. Aside from that, I did look up Don on CaseNet, which, if you're not familiar with CaseNet, Missouri has a website where you can look up basically anybody in the state of Missouri and see if they have any kind of court cases in the state of Missouri, whether it be a traffic ticket, divorce, criminal infractions, protection order, any of that type of stuff will be on CaseNet. It's a great tool and resource to use. So I looked up Don, and you can actually see in 1977 when Linda filed for divorce. So in 1977, it's got a dissolution. In 1979, that dissolution was actually dismissed. And then in 1985, there's another, for some reason in 1985, they weren't really called dissolutions anymore. Or in that time, it just says Linda Sue Sherman versus Donald Sherman. And if you go into it, it's for a divorce. And then in 1989, it was actually dismissed again. So then we don't really have much until 1994. So in 1994, he has, I guess at some point he got remarried, and then he's got another divorce in 1994.
Did she have this person that he married or divorced in 1994, any ex parte?
So in 1994, no. In 1994, it just says there's a CCCS administrative order, which I don't really know what that was in 1984 or 1994 because they don't really use that terminology anymore. The administrative order, that could actually have been a protection order. An order of protection. There's a divorce filed in 1994. Doesn't look like it ever went through, but it wasn't dismissed. It didn't go through until March of 2000. It's filed again, dissolution with children. It actually says without children, But then when you actually go into the docket entries, it has a child
You don't think it's Patty?
listed. No, it's not Patty because
It doesn't carry through like
no,
that?
in 2000 she would have been
Like 25, 15.
yeah,
Right,
so she wasn't a minor in 2000.
Yeah,
So then in February of 2000, so right before the divorce, there was adult abuse without stalking and a protection order. In that charge, there is a child listed, but the child has the last name of the spouse. So I'm not sure if that's maybe a stepchild. Not sure. Could be a biological child. I don't know. And then February of 2000 is the adult abuse without stalking protection order, and then in March of 2000 there is a dissolution. That divorce actually did go through. So it looks like there's not a whole lot on
How many times he
Don
been
since
divorced?
2000.
How many times was he
Well,
married? 3 times?
Well, no, 2 that I know of. Maybe he's married now, but he was married to Linda and then this woman, and then I don't know if he's married now.
Mm.
In conclusion, by all accounts, according to Linda's family, to her siblings and her parents, Don and Linda's relationship was a little chaotic. It was a lot of back and forth, break up, get back together, that he could have been abusive to her. Kind of seems like he was. And according to her brother, this divorce was going to be it. This was it. She was leaving him for good. And I think that's a good enough motive to make someone disappear. So if you look at the motive, who else had a motive to make her disappear? I don't see anyone. There is not a whole lot in terms of media on this case. There are some Riverfront Times, some St. Louis Post-Dispatch articles. There is an Unsolved Mysteries episode called Skullduggery. It's from 2001. I was unable to find it. It's not on Netflix. Hulu has, I think, the first 4 seasons. This is actually season 8. There's nothing on YouTube. There's nothing I can find to actually see this episode. And I do remember watching it at some point, but to find it now, I've not been able to find it. But that has a lot of helpful information. Don is on Facebook. His daughter's on Facebook. I thought about reaching out to them, but I just don't know if it's something that they want to kind of rehash or bring up. I would love for this. I know the daughter, Patty, in articles, she's kind of alluded to the fact that she thinks her dad did it, but I think
does.
But she's not come out and been completely against him, and did do a little Facebook stalking, and she is friends with him on Facebook. So I'm thinking they have some type of relationship. What that is, I don't know. I don't see there being a motive for anyone else to do any harm to her. I mean, he had the means, the motive, and the opportunity.
What was his motive? Because
his motive was that she was leaving him
and maybe taking his daughter.
Right. And one of the things her brother said is every time she had left him before, so the 2 times she had left him before, she took Patty. Mm-hmm. So why would she leave this time and not take Patty? The motive is that she was leaving him, and it looked like it was for good. She had a pretty good job. She was stable, probably more mature, more grown up.
What's he do?
I don't know. Not sure.
Did he ever go to college? Either one of them ever go to college?
I don't think so. No, not that it mentioned. No, I mean, she was pregnant at 17 years old, so in her senior year of high school, she had a child.
Yeah, but usually, like, one of them will try to, okay, let me try to go to school or college or something to help.
It's not mentioned, but like I said, there's not a lot of coverage on this case other than some articles, and the articles are old.
Is his daughter married, Patty? Is she married now? Have children?
I believe she has children. I think she had them kind of young, and it looks like she's maybe been married and divorced. Not really sure. Patty, if you'd like to talk, please get in touch with us. We can do another follow-up episode. We'd really like to know what happened to your mom, as I'm sure you do as well. And just get some peace and maybe find where her body is located so she can get a proper burial. They did actually have to exhume her skull. And then they sent, I think it might have been after they exhumed it when they sent it to Mizzou.
What's exhumed? I thought exhumed means you bring it out of the ground.
Right. They buried her skull.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
So they know it's her.
Yeah.
And, okay, so now she has a death certificate. They give her a death certificate at that point?
Yeah, but what does that have to do with anything?
Well, I'm just thinking how that process works. So if your spouse dies, did he ever get divorced from her? He must have.
Yeah, he did after, well, I'm thinking, it's not mentioned in the articles, but I'm thinking once her skull was found, because in 1994, there's a divorce that's filed, there's a divorce
Yeah, but he didn't grant it. The judge didn't grant it.
No, they had to have at some point, because in 1994 a divorce is filed for another woman. So at some point before 1994 he got married again.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
so the skull was found in 1990. It wasn't identified until 91. He could have.
Yeah, but think about that. Okay, that CCCS could be okay. I didn't tell you I was married before. I told you I was married before, but I never told you I got divorced. I'm still technically married. Therefore, this marriage could be null and void and never have happened. That's why it's not an official divorce. I can't divorce you because I was already married.
That could be. That could possibly be. But after 91, when the skull is identified as her, he could at that point have gotten the divorce pushed through at that point, because
Yeah, maybe he just didn't do it though. I'm just gonna leave. He might already been married to the other woman.
yeah, maybe. But that also could be a motive of why he had to have that skull identified, of why he dropped it off in
That's what I'm
1990.
thinking, right? He
And then
wanted disclosure.
and then he was thinking, I'm gonna give him the skull in 1990, but he just kind of banked on them figuring it out,
And it didn't happen.
and it didn't happen.
They got put in front of the flight attendants.
Right, the cops didn't,
Put the pieces together. Communicate like they could today, maybe.
Yeah, they didn't figure it out, and so in September of 1991, he could be getting pressure from this woman, like, we got to get married.
Hurry up and take care of this, will you?
Yeah, we got to get married.
You're trying to tell them what's going on. They don't get it.
So that's when he's like, okay, I'll let him know is her skull, I mean, that seems crazy, but it also seems like it makes sense as well, because they weren't solving it. There is, I think, on Find a Grave, her grave, where her skull is buried, but her body is out there somewhere. Like I said, I don't know if you buried a body in the backyard, if you would actually sell the home, but I think stranger things have happened. I'm sure that's happened before, of somebody selling it and then they dig up a body later. Basically.
Yeah, because you said that the skull, when they pulled that skull, there were some dirt fragments on it, right?
It was buried.
So
and
it was buried.
It was definitely
Whoever
buried.
Did it had to go dig it up.
Yeah.
Separate the skull from the rest of the body.
Yeah.
Bury the rest of that. Bring this skull, clean it up. No, it didn't clean it up. It was degraded, right? I mean, everything was dissolved because
it was intact.
Dirt.
I mean, it was the jawbone.
Yeah, but it was just a skull. There was no flesh or
and
hair, nothing.
No,
left,
not that was mentioned. No. Mm-mm.
So it had to be some time that was in the dirt underground. Then 5 years later, whatever. How many years was it?
1990. So 5 years. Yeah, 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. They this person dug it up, pulled that skull off, and put all the dirt back.
And there was mentioned, I think in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, they actually have footage of the skull. There wasn't any kind of fractures or damage to the skull, like, in terms of how she was killed. There was no blunt force trauma, no fractures, there's no facial fractures. So she didn't die from any kind of beating or blow to the head, as
Not
it
to the
appears
head,
to the skull.
But his dad was killed by a gun. So, I mean,
she wasn't shot in the head, because
No.
there's nothing in the skull that suggests that. But when you find bones, remains, and that person was strangled, unless the rope or the actual, what's it called, the weapon that they used, unless it's still there, you don't really know with bones if they've been strangled. So
right.
With just a skull, it's hard to make that determination when there's no visible damage to the skull, which she did not have. So, but very little else. So unfortunately, we don't know what happened to Linda. We don't know where the rest of her body is, and we don't know who did this to her. If you do have any hints or clues or any information, you can always let us know, but obviously call the St. Louis County Police Department. I don't think the case is in Bridgeton or in Bonita Park. It's in St. Louis County. They would definitely be able to help you, or let us know if we got something wrong. I think that's it for this week. See you next week. Be good.
And if you can't be good, be careful.